Okay, so if we can formally open the meeting, good afternoon. This is the second meeting of the Finance and Assets Working Group. No apologies at the moment. Everybody's here, but we are waiting for Danielle to arrive as well. Can I first of all check, any declarations of interest for this meeting from anybody?
No.
No? Thank you. I issued the minutes for the previous meeting, they went out. I just wanted to check whether there were any comments on the minutes themselves, or if we can accept them as agreed. That's fine. But I just wanted to review the actions that we had from that meeting. So the first action was, Karen, you were going to ensure the terms of reference were updated. You've recirculated the.
I sent this out.
Yeah.
I've brought a copy with me today. So.
Okay, that's great. So one of the things that will be going to the next Finance and General Purposes Committee for the STBF is a report with the terms of reference attached to seek their agreement for us to oversee the finances and assets for the STBF. We'd sort of assumed that's the case, and it was discussed in the Finance and General Purposes Committee to do that. But in terms of governance, as Colin quite rightly pointed out, we need to go to the STBF version as well. Okay? So that's that, I can close that action. Number 2 was working group members to consider any suitable co-optees that could be invited to join the working group. Now I think we left that sort of up in the air in the sense that it wasn't about to come into this meeting with some names. It was about at any relevant time we would decide whether we wanted anybody else involved. So we'll leave that as an outstanding action. The third action was for Karen to ensure that the newly recruited asset officer, when in post, should be invited to join the working group, so that stays open. I think Colin has updated us to say that there are interviews imminent, so we'll see the outcome of those interviews. The fourth action was the one I just referred to about taking the terms of reference to the STBF version of the Finance and General Purposes Committee, so I will do that. Peter Breen was to share with members of the working group the budget streams, the assets and Tollbridge Fund income drawdown documents that you were working on. You've done that, Peter.
Yeah.
So I can close that action. And then the final one was the both work streams to provide to this meeting a description of the scope of their work and an outlined delivery plan which details the steps that will be undertaken and timescales. So we can cover that when we get into the main part of the meeting, if that's okay. So going back up to the agenda, public participation. We haven't anybody here who would like to participate apart from ourselves, so we'll move on from that. Peter, would you prefer to wait to see if Danielle arrives so you can do it, John, because we can do ours first?
I'm easy. Well, either Danielle and myself have had a couple of discussions about this, so I think I'm quite okay just to kind of to crack on.
Okay. Crack on then.
So in terms of the scope, I think really in summary what we want to do, and I can send this through to you so you don't need to make any notes. We plan to do an analysis of the various cost centres. And when we're talking about cost centres, obviously the Town Council, the Tollbridge Fund, the Museum, the Guildhall, Maddox, Monk's Wall. As far as I'm concerned, those are all cost centres. So that we're able to present clear management accounts with respect to what the income is for each of those, what the expenditures are, what the assets are and what the assets are worth, and what loans, if any loans, and so forth are there. So that's really the scope. How it will pan out at the end of the day is the journey that we're on, so I can't at the moment say this exactly is the model that we're going to use, but you have seen from the models that are sent out, you know, some of kind of the basic thinking. But the tasks, we've got about 5 tasks we've identified associated with this task. And the first one is to use the latest budget information with a live Excel spreadsheet, because the spreadsheets that I've sent out were developed by myself
Yes.
following kind of my induction
Yes.
when we received a kind of a copy of the budget type of thing, a printed copy of the budget. So all of those entries in that spreadsheet were kind of manual entries. So we want the latest budget, and Karen's going to send me and Danielle a copy of the latest budget spreadsheet.
Yep.
The second thing we've been thinking about and we'd like to do is develop, in agreement with Karen, a code of accounts that can be used going forward. So for each cost centre, let's say the Sandwich Town Council is cost centre 01, Tollbridge is 02, Museum is 03. So we've got this kind of coding structure so that income then would be, you know, again 01 or whatever. So we want to develop that because there may well be a coding structure in place already, and it should help with your new accountancy system. And we want, because this is basically making sure at ground roots level we've got the base, we're talking the same language.
Yeah, just to add to that, if we start a coding system now, we may have to change it when we have this new finance system in place, because it will be down to their advice and their particular system as to what our coding system might be.
Right.
Yeah, so it may be a waste of time until we have that in place, and that may be as soon as March or April. So it's up to you whether we start one and then change it.
Yeah, well, I think for the purpose of this, we're due to complete in 6 months, so I think we will crack on and do a coding system. It might be worth just asking Jill if other places who've used these accountancy systems have a kind of a code of structures type of thing.
They will do.
Yeah, and maybe they would be kind enough to share it with them, and then we can, you know, we can, because Danielle works a lot with SAP and I work with other things, and so you can have kind of these different code structures. So we'll work on that. The third task that we've kind of said, and I think I spoke to you, Emmett, about this, we want to contribute to, for each asset, we want to have a single asset data sheet, which is or an asset fact sheet. And that asset fact sheet, in our view, should have 5 sections: a legal section including obligations, a financial section, a maintenance section, options, what to do with the asset, and recommendations going forward. So it's got, and I'll type all of this up and send it to, so that Karen's got it for. So in terms of the financial section, obviously what we want to be able to include is what was the cost, what is the book value, and what is the current value. What is the liabilities or loans that are on that particular asset? What's the revenue to the asset? What are the maintenance, upkeep costs? And what's the capital provision, so that we can see what's the income versus the cost, to see if that particular asset is a millstone round our neck or not, and actually put together the facts on it.
So how do you envisage drawing that information out? Or are you seeking that that's information we will capture in what we're doing, we'll pass it across to you to drop into that fact sheet?
Absolutely, because I think we need to work in conjunction. So, because there's no point in the cost people, coming up with one thing and the asset review team. So we just need, at the end of the day, to develop what that sheet looks like, and whether it is a Word document with sections or whether it's a spreadsheet which has got Excel. So are you happy for me to have a first stab at that? I can put areas in for free text to be put in.
Well, that's what we're working on.
Right.
In terms of the assets, we're hoping to create a big spreadsheet with all of this information, because we're going through the leases item by item.
But we haven't done any work on it. So we've got an opportunity here to make sure it has to align with what you're doing. So we've got not diving deep into what we've been doing, but we've got headings, which is common with what you want to do.
Yeah.
But we just need to make sure that what happens is we don't go away and spend a number of days creating a spreadsheet. You do the same, and actually one of us has done it, and that was enough.
Well, so if we can agree the template.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So we're only interested in finance side, we're not interested in legal. We need a finance and maintenance costing.
Yeah, but we
need
need
to look at
to
overall pictures.
we need to understand what the legal obligations
Yeah.
are in terms of the maintenance, so that we can then do an estimate of the maintenance.
So why don't we go on.
I mean, I think there is a danger of duplication,
Yes.
but part of me thinks, well, perhaps it would be no bad thing if two people look at the same issue, because if we come up with different answers, then perhaps it shows the extent of the model.
If I jump on the offer you made, Peter, if you are going to create a fact sheet that has those component parts, do that. What we can do, we can give to you already the headings that we've come up with, but we then technically don't have to build the solution. But we will continue, as we're going to do, is capture each of the information to sit under the headings.
Okay.
It then drops into a single fact sheet,
We
spreadsheet,
can
whatever
share
it is.
spreadsheets, we
Yeah.
have our own,
Yeah.
we can create our
Yeah.
own, and you have yours, so we can share.
Yeah, and there might be a slight
Overlap.
besides that, between the type of asset, if it's a building or a piece of land,
Yeah.
I just need to pan that out in mind.
We're not going to do anything in 24 hours.
No.
Can that larger spreadsheet then be labelled an asset register? And have
Exactly.
that
That's what we-
Exactly.
So this is, in my opinion, this is all about knowledge management.
Yes, that's
We
right.
need to build from the top downwards. So you have the asset, the register, and then you can drill down to each asset, and you've got the component part of information for each asset.
And then now looking into the new future assets manager
Yes.
could work with us together.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. As soon as they arrive, they'll take ownership of it.
Take a long time.
I mean, I mentioned before, the vision I had was that the assets officer, if and when appointed, would be doing this work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that we're doing it, but really it's an executive function.
It is.
And we're
It is.
non-executives.
Yes.
But, why are we doing this when someone else should be doing it? But I mean, we're trying to clear up a big
We're
muddle,
fi-
aren't we?
We're
Well,
filling a
that's
gap.
exactly.
We're bridging a gap.
Yes.
Yeah, but because, for me, whilst this is a town council, it's fraught with complexities.
It is.
And that's why we've got all of these different cost centres distorting
Yes.
the actual accounts, when we look at income in
Yeah.
and stuff like that, Okay,
That's
so
good.
so that's what we're doing. We've done one of the things that you'll have seen on the spreadsheet is a staff. So there's a budget of the staff. So I've actually moved that on a bit now for the different cost centres, so that we can actually put a percentage time allocation.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the public convenience cleaners, that's 100% the responsibility of Sandwich Town Council.
Yeah.
Whereas the town clerk is, 8,
50-50.
well,
On the
between,
spreadsheet though, what's it say?
right across the different cost centres
Yeah.
between, and for somebody like yourself, probably more so than the town clerk. So we will need to agree that, and that's going to be arbitrary, so we're going to have to bring that to this meeting
Yeah.
and maybe involve the town clerk,
Yeah.
to kind of get that.
Okay.
And in doing all of this, the intent is to establish a budget for the museum, for Monk's Wall, and for Maddox, because they're all mixed in at the moment.
Just to add that percentage allocation already exists and has done so for years.
All right.
And that's what I use to calculate and apportion salaries.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you can let me, let us have a copy of that and share that with Greg. So that's all of the tasks that we're planning to do.
Yeah.
The timescales, I can't give a definitive timescale but I do feel that 6 months or 5 more months of this working party is achievable, because we do need input from others to be able to kind of really get motoring. And so really the next steps now are getting a hold of the Excel spreadsheet, please, Karen, the asset input, and a bit more familiarisation with us on the various assets. Sorry if I've gone on.
I am working currently today, working on the draft budget again for the F and GP
Oh, yeah.
on
Yeah.
Monday.
Right.
So I'm at this
Excellent.
moment doing the
Yeah.
budget, so
Okay.
I'll try and get it to
Yeah.
you.
Before Christmas present.
Well, I'll try and get you the version that I sent to the F and
Yeah,
GP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
With
Okay,
Christmas break.
thank you, Peter.
Right.
That's really good. Thank you.
Yes.
I see that what we're doing is probably very different. Yours seems, it's very theoretical in the sense that it's looking at financial information. Ours is
Turning over stones.
yeah, ours is proving to be very different. So I don't know whether Colin or Nick want to give a view on.
So, Councillor Zucker has very kindly
Started.
produced a number of documents. So we've got a list of assets split between STC assets and Tollbridge Fund assets, and he's tried to identify where we have title and where we have a lease or related documentation. And it's quite clear from that, I mean, we can go through this list, I guess, would be useful, but it's quite clear from that there's lots of missing documentation. And I think this is a real problem for this local authority, that to me these are the most important documents we should possess, and some of them we can't find. So there's clearly been a degree of poor administration from going back years, 30, 40 years in some cases. So we need to identify where these documents are, probably need to do some more searches, look through the collection, the archive, perhaps contact solicitors who may or may have been involved in drafting these leases and whether they retain copies, and ultimately, and fairly embarrassingly, going to the actual leaseholders to say, can we see your copy of the lease?
You could put a freedom of information requesting
On ourselves.
It is really surprising how little information there is
And how
about some of these
Yeah.
properties. You
and
don't
some
even know who owned them,
contradictions.
contradictions, partial documents, documents with uncoloured plans,
Yes.
which mean nothing if you haven't got
Coloured
colours of the plans. A lot of it we
Yeah.
can assemble. The land registry we can get on some of the properties.
Yes.
We can get information from.
So I think sorry, Karen, I think we're on a journey like Peter said as well. We're only at the start of it, and I see it as actually an opportunity to get it right rather than seeing as throwing the towel in. That isn't the way, but we are going to, you may have a real confidence about 6 months being enough. I think we're going to use the 6 months.
I think we probably will. I mean, if things
Yeah.
can't be done overnight.
Yeah. So we're prioritising the assets that we think we need to look at first
Yes.
for different reasons. There are some that are more important than others. And then there are others probably right down the end of the chain that you think actually the fact we own it is okay. Do we need to sweat a lot to find documentation?
Yeah.
Possibly not.
Yeah.
But they're right at the bottom of it. So we're going to work through. We've done a couple of reviews today, haven't we?
Yeah.
And that's thrown up questions as well as answers.
I think one of the other things we need to do is ask the town clerk to contact the previous town clerk, or clerks in some cases, to see if they can shed any light on some of these documents. But we've started today going through the two things, the Guildhall lease and the Sandwich Agreement, so we can talk about those now.
Yeah, very complicated, aren't they?
They are. So, the Guildhall lease is a lease between DDC and Sandwich Town Council and the Tollbridge Fund jointly and severally, which means that the Tollbridge Fund and the Town Council are both signatories to the lease. The lease is for 99 years from 1974, so it has 50 years exactly to run. There's formulas in the lease about rental payments, and there's a link to a number of properties which are also part of the Sandwich Agreement, and we're not quite clear what the thinking was behind that arrangement, but in effect, we're not paying any lease, any rent on this property, and DDC are not making any contributions.
As I understand it, we, the council, haven't paid any rent to Dover Council for the Guildhall lease for a number of years. Am I right, Karen?
Well, I've been here 10 years and no, we
No.
never have.
Okay, yes.
Although they did used to pay us a contribution towards the running
Yes.
of the
Yes.
Yes, they did used to pay a contribute, and they said, and the last thing Dover Council said to me was, we balance one against the other. But they haven't paid any contribution, and we haven't paid any rent, so it doesn't.
They did used to pay contribution up until
Yes,
the person at the desk, the front desk.
yes, they did, because
moved
they
out.
occupied,
Yes.
they
Yeah.
occupied part
Occupies.
of the,
Yeah.
which is set out in the lease.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
proportion they paid was then reduced.
Yeah.
And now it's zero.
Yeah.
And there are other inconsistencies in the lease. The user clause is not appropriate anymore.
Yeah.
What we can use it for, and a lot of other things. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of work needed there.
Yeah.
And we're going to have discussions with the council, with Dover Council at some stage.
Yeah.
About the way forward
And
on.
to some extent, I mean, I think the Guildhall lease is a really good example in the sense that we've got the document, which is great, which we haven't got in all other places. You can interpret the document so you know what's in it, albeit an amount of it's out of date. So therefore, it doesn't stop us running the show from now on.
Absolutely.
So you can highlight the things that it requires us to do. It also highlights the things that DDC should do. So again, that's all stated. So we can actually form something that would go into the fact sheet around the Guildhall. But then, at an appropriate point, you've got conversations like, do you go back to DDC and say, actually, the agreement is so out of date in terms of the reality of today, do we need to renegotiate it? And then there are other aspects in there about clarification. We can deal with that when we've got an asset manager, possibly.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, that's what I was saying on this fact sheet. We actually have what are the options,
Yeah.
what are the options going forward,
Yeah.
and then what would we,
Recommend.
as a working group, recommend?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we need to ask, once we've got all our facts lined up, we need to go to DDC and ask for a meeting to try and say, look, this lease is well out of date.
Yes.
It's completely meaningless in part.
Yeah.
So it talks about the police office and other bits of it.
Yeah.
And to say, can we renegotiate the lease?
Yeah.
And there has been talk of whether they might want to swap this building for another building. So all those issues we need to explore.
Including the inconsistency which has come about regarding two Market Street.
Yeah.
DDC say in a Freedom of Information reply that they own it. The Sandwich Agreement says we own it. But we can find that out because we can go to the land registry and we can look at the time form.
But also because the lease is between DDC and Sandwich Town Council and the Tollbridge Fund, my view is that lease is the source of all our problems in terms of the complicated relationship between, the varying accounts and the ways we operate. And if it was just to STC or just to the Tollbridge Fund, life would be so much simpler.
So in terms of the scope, we've got a clearly defined scope, which is the list of assets. There are question marks about the ownership of some of those within it, but that's our scope. We will look at all those assets over the coming months. We will produce the information that you need for the fact sheet hierarchy to drop that information in. We will, as we move along through the priority list, have to go and, for example, end up getting from land registry documents that actually don't exist here. But that's fine, because at the end of the exercise is to say for each of the assets, this is the product set that supports it. So it's very mechanistic, I think.
I think the other thing is once the assets officer is in post, we should think about doing a visit to all of these assets, subject to tenancies and getting access. Because there's things like Boatman's Chapel, which I've walked past many times and never been inside. Is it capable of being let to someone? Could we identify a tenant?
I don't know where it is.
The same with Fishergate.
To go past Soul and Karen, there's a cemetery, and then right at the front there's this small building. It's a lovely, it's a really nice looking building, but
It is, it's a very attractive building.
Yeah.
Sitting in the middle of a
just
cemetery.
sitting there.
Yeah.
I mean, it is,
I mean,
somebody.
to me, an ideal tenant would be a
Must be somebody
stonemason.
who would use that.
Good
Good
idea.
idea.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, so I think you're entirely right, Colin, because out of this exercise has got to be the way of finding opportunities for the council to generate more income, because that's only the right thing to do for residents. And there are a number of properties on this list that are just sitting there.
And also things like Cowleys, whether there's
Yeah,
income
land.
from that for
Yeah.
parking or
Yeah,
other events,
yeah.
fun fairs. It's land which potentially has a revenue stream attached to it.
Okay, so that's where we are, but
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we've opened.
So
Can it work?
We made a start.
we're working through them in order of priority. So we felt the Guildhall lease was the most important.
Yeah.
But then we're probably going to be looking at Drill Hall and the Fitness Connection because they're in the frame for discussions
Yeah.
about leases and so on.
Yeah.
And then just work our way through the rest.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to overrate the discussion about it. We know what we're doing, but we're already at the start of it. So that's from us. So anything else anybody would like to play in today?
Just mention the assets officer because that's been out for advert, and myself, the mayor, and town clerk are going to be possibly another councillor will be interviewing next week for that role. As you recall, it's only a 1-year role, which potentially
In hindsight.
could cause problems. But we've got 3 candidates to interview who we felt could be appointable. But we need to. I mean, it's obviously difficult to find someone who has both asset management experience and legal experience, which is required for this role.
Is it been advertised as a full-time or part-time role?
It's a full-time
It
role.
is a full-time.
But it's on a year's.
For a year's contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we may need to reflect on that should, if it's a successful outcome, brilliant. If there's not, we might need to look at that again.
But if you find someone, for example, who has really good maintenance, asset management, but less so on the legal side, I think between us we can probably input to that side of
I
things.
think we can cover for that.
But if you only had someone who had legal experience and no asset, that would be less.
Yeah.
That would be less valuable.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good updates. I'm glad you seem to be steaming ahead.
Steaming.
So I don't think we should meet until January, unless people would love to come in the 3rd week in December.
Excuse me, Christina didn't tell me how to switch it off.
Okay. She should hopefully arrive shortly, but I'll come around and.
I just thought if you're going to
don't worry.
chat, you
Yes,
might want
yeah.
it off.
No, thank you. That's very helpful.
You pull the plug.
So no, we haven't quite finished yet. We haven't agreed the date. So I'll liaise with Karen. We'll come up with a date. But I'm looking at probably the 2nd or 3rd week in January, subject to other council meetings.
Yeah,
if that's
I'm
okay.
on leave. I'm on holiday. January.
All of January.
No, 2nd, middle to end.
Middle to end.
I mean, Paul probably know I am.
Okay.
He not join some of them.
If you're okay,
Yeah.
We'll have them in. I don't want to come in too soon after
Yeah,
Christmas
so
because we're going to have
I'm
more.
away
work
from the
stream.
17th, basically. So
Okay.
before the 17th,
Yeah.
I could make it.
But the 3 of us will
Yeah,
keep working through
unfortunately,
this.
Well, we'll keep working.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you, Peter?
Yeah.
Anyway, I might not go at the moment, just
Oh, okay.
it's too, I'm going away with my 2 daughters. Paul not join us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We'll come out with the date. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a good Christmas.
Thank you. But we still got council meeting to come.